Welcome back, everyone, to Lost Shrine. Tonight, I've got 6 true and terrifying stories from the backroads of West Virginia. Creepy drives that will make you think twice before hitting the road after dark. Each encounter is stranger and more unsettling than the last, blending real-life terror with the eerie isolation of these mountain roads. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share these stories with friends who love a good scare, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. Now buckle up. The night is waiting. I have driven lonely roads my whole life, the kind that don't show up right on maps and don't stay the same from one season to the next. Out here in these mountains, a stretch of asphalt can feel like it's got moods. Some nights it's friendly, a little quiet but harmless. Other nights, it feels like the trees lean closer, like the dark is paying attention. That night on Route 17, I swear the dark was listening before I even made the first turn onto it. I'd left my buddy's place later than I meant to. He lived near the edge of the valley where the ridge curls in like a pair of knuckles. Fog liked to slip in early that time of year, October creeping toward November. I figured I had maybe an hour before it thickened into something you could scoop with a shovel, and I wanted to be home long before then. Route 17 used to be the main road through that part of the county, but years back a new highway cut around the hills, and this one got left behind. Locals still used it, but only during the day. At night, folks said it played tricks. Headlights bending wrong, sounds echoing like somebody whistling for you from the tree line, that sort of thing. Nothing supernatural, just the kind of stories mountain people used to warn each other. But I'd driven that stretch maybe a dozen times. It was old, cracked and lonely, sure, but I never had anything strange happen on it. Not until that night. The fog was hanging low, not touching the pavement yet, but drifting in ribbons across the tops of the trees. My truck hummed steady, the radio low so I could hear the road. Only 1 or 2 houses were scattered out that way. Old homesteads with sagging barns, yards full of rusted equipment that hadn't moved in years. I didn't pass a single car for the first 15 minutes. Then, in my rear-view mirror, a pair of headlights eased into view. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Someone else trying to beat the fog, maybe heading to one of the old cabins at the far end. They stayed back at a normal distance, far enough not to blind me. But after a mile or two, I noticed something. Every time I slowed for a curve, they slowed. When I accelerated down a straightaway, they matched me perfectly. Too perfectly. The road wasn't complicated, just a handful of turns that wound through the valley before crossing a narrow single-lane bridge. But the way that car mirrored my movements felt deliberate, like they were using my truck as a guide instead of driving the road themselves. I tapped my brakes lightly, just enough to flash my taillights. The car behind me mirrored the motion exactly. Perfect timing, perfect spacing. A little chill went through my chest, but I tried to brush it off. Some folks drive too close at night because they're nervous. Maybe the fog was messing with them. I kept going. When I reached the long downhill stretch just before the bridge, something shifted. The headlights behind me seemed wrong. Too bright against the fog. Too sharp. Almost like they weren't shining through the air, but floating in it. I blinked a few times, rubbed my eyes. I'd been up since before dawn for work. Long day, tired brain. I told myself that was all it was. But then we reached the bridge. It was one of those narrow iron things from decades back, just wide enough for one vehicle, planks clacking under the tires. I always tapped the horn once out of habit before crossing, just in case someone was coming the other way. That night after I tapped the horn, I eased about halfway across and came to a stop. Not slamming on the brakes, but slow and steady, like I was testing a hunch. Sure enough, the headlights behind me rolled to a stop too. I waited. The river below whispered against the rocks. The fog settled heavier on the steel beams around me, wrapping the truck in quiet. I rolled down my window, half expecting to hear a door open, someone calling out, maybe a lost traveler or someone who needed help. But there were no footsteps, no voices, not even the soft creak of someone shifting in their seat. Just my engine idling in the hush of water under my feet. Minutes slid by, 3, 4, maybe 5. I stared into the rearview mirror, the glow of those headlights steady as stones. They didn't flicker, didn't waver. They just stayed there like they were staring back at me. Then, without dimming or fading, they vanished. Not blinked, not shut off. Vanished. 1 second they were there, burning through the fog. The next, the world behind me went pitch black. I froze. My breath caught high in my chest. I rolled down the window farther, leaning halfway out, expecting to see the outline of a car, any shape at all. But the end of the bridge behind me was empty. Nothing but darkness and the faint gleam of wet pavement. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I threw the truck into gear and tore off that bridge hard enough the tires skidded on the old wood. My heart hammered against my ribs, my hands sweating on the wheel. I kept checking the mirror, expecting, wanting, needing to see something back there. Anything. But there was nothing. Just fog. For the rest of the drive home, 40 minutes of winding forest roads, I didn't see another vehicle. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my nerves were a shredded mess. I sat there for a minute, letting the engine tick as it cooled. My dog usually barked from inside when I pulled up, but even he stayed quiet. I don't know why, but that silence felt like part of whatever had happened on that bridge. Inside, my hands were still shaking when I set my keys down. I needed to settle my mind, convince myself I'd misread the whole thing. Maybe a reflection from my own lights had bounced off the fog. Maybe I'd hallucinated from exhaustion. I kept reaching for explanations like I was grabbing vines in the dark. And then I remembered my dash cam. I'd bought the thing after a deer clipped my bumper the odd winter before. It turned on automatically whenever the truck was running. If there had been a car behind me, the camera would have caught it. I sat down on the couch, opened the app on my phone, and scrolled to the recording from that night. For the first few minutes, everything looked normal. Dark road, occasional road sign flashing by, my own tail lights reflecting off the asphalt. Then I reached the moment the headlights first appeared to me. Except, in the video, nothing appeared. No lights, no glow, no shadow. Just empty road stretching behind me, black as a cave. My stomach sank. I felt cold all over, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I watched myself slow down. The camera showed the road behind me staying empty. I watched myself pull onto the bridge. Still empty. In the recording, I could hear my voice faintly, muttering, "What the hell? Why are you so close?" I remembered saying that, talking to the car behind me. But in the recording, I was talking to nothing. Then the footage reached the moment the headlights vanished. In reality, they'd blinked out like someone flicked a switch. But in the video, nothing changed. The road behind me was bare the entire time. Watching myself stare into the mirror, watching my own face shift from confusion to fear, knowing that I was seeing something my camera didn't. That rattled me worse than the encounter itself. I replayed the clip a dozen times, scrubbing back and forth through the bridge scene, zooming in, adjusting the exposure, trying anything to catch the faintest hint of those lights. But it was just empty road, cold, dead, silent. For days after, I avoided Route 17. I drove half an hour out of my way to take the highway instead. There was a weight in my chest I couldn't shake, a feeling like I'd been somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, or seen something that wasn't meant for me. A week later, I mentioned it, carefully, to one of the old-timers at the feed store. I didn't say what I'd seen, just asked if he'd ever had strange experiences on that stretch of road. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting someone to ask. Said he'd stopped driving Route 17 after dark years ago. Too many near misses that didn't make sense. Headlights where no car was. Shapes in mirrors that disappeared when you turned around. Once, he claimed, he heard a horn behind him when no one was there. He wasn't the kind of man who made up stories. He told it plain, almost tired. Road remembers things, he said quietly. Sometimes it shows them to folks. Sometimes it shows you things that ain't there no more. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. Even now, months later, I still feel that night sitting in me like a bruise. Sometimes, when I'm driving late and glance in the rearview mirror, I brace myself without meaning to. I wait for a pair of lights that aren't really there. One or two times, I swear I've seen a faint glow. Just a hint of white hovering far back on the road. But when I look again, it's gone. And I can't decide which feeling is worse. The fear that I'm losing it, or the fear that I'm not. I don't know why I took the old coal road that night. Folks around Paint Creek say that road shows up different depending on who you are and what you're running from, but to me it was just supposed to be a shortcut. I'd taken it a few times growing up, before the landslides, before the mines shut down, before the fog began to gather so heavy you could taste the damp metal of it on your tongue. That night, the fog was sitting low, sliding across the pavement in slow, pale sheets that curled around my headlights like something alive. The mountains weren't just quiet. They were expectant. The kind of quiet where you feel like you're trespassing. About 5 miles in, I came around a bend where the guardrail looked like it had been crumpled by a giant hand, and that's when I saw her. A woman stood next to the broken rail, white dress hanging limp against her legs, her arms wrapped tight around her chest. At first, I thought she'd crashed, maybe slid off the road and crawled back up. I slowed down to check on her, but something inside me twisted the closer I got. She wasn't waving me down. She wasn't moving at all. She just stared straight out into the valley like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. I rolled down my window, keeping a hand on the wheel. "Ma'am, you okay?" She didn't look at me, didn't blink. The fog thickened around her feet, making it look like she was standing ankle-deep in milk. I eased the truck beside her, engine rumbling low against the mountain walls. When she finally turned her head toward me, it was slow, too slow, like she had to remember how to move. Her eyes were wide, not scared, but searching my face like she recognized me and was trying to be sure. I asked again if she was hurt. Instead of answering, she whispered, "Did you see him too?" Her voice barely carried over the sound of my idling truck. It was fragile, like it had been used too much or not at all for years. I didn't know who she meant, and before I could form any reply, she took one small step backward, then another. I shouted for her to stop. I told her there was nothing behind her but the drop, but she didn't even flinch. She stepped off the edge like she was stepping off a curb. I slammed the truck in park so hard the gear stick groaned, then ran to the guardrail. The valley below was black, the fog rising from it in slow coils. I waited for the sound of branches breaking, someone tumbling through brush. Anything, but nothing came. No scream, no splash in the creek below. She was simply gone, consumed by the dark. For a moment, I thought I saw movement at the edge. Something pale, like a hand gripping the lower rail, but when I blinked, it was gone. I don't know how long I stood there before forcing myself back into the truck. My hands shook on the steering wheel so bad I could hardly hold it straight. I drove with my brights on, even though they barely reached beyond the fog, and every shadow looked like it wanted to step into the road. When I reached the first house with a porch light, I practically stumbled out of the truck and banged on the door. An older man answered, the kind who looked like he'd lived his whole life on that mountain. I told him what I saw. His face went still in a way I can't explain, like hearing something he'd been waiting for. He called the sheriff without asking questions. When the sheriff picked up, he didn't respond right away after the man explained. There was this long pause, and then the sheriff told me he'd send someone out. His voice dropped, quiet and steady. If she was standing by that guardrail, you didn't see anyone alive. I slept in one of the man's wooden chairs while we waited, hands clasped so tight my knuckles ached. The forest outside the window felt wrong, too still, too watchful. The deputy who finally arrived asked me to come with him back to the site. I didn't want to, but something told me I needed to. The fog had thickened by then, rolling across the road in pieces that drifted like slow-moving figures. When we reached the bend, his spotlight swept the broken guardrail, then the drop, then the trees below. He crouched near the spot she'd been standing. He pointed at the ground. What made my stomach twist was how clean the pavement was. No footprints, no drag marks. The moisture should have captured every detail, but there was nothing. Only my boot prints where I'd scrambled. The deputy rose slowly, like someone who already knew what he'd find. "You're not the first to see her," he said, "and you won't be the last." He told me the story on the way back, about a woman from the 1960s whose fiancé died in a mine collapse. She refused to believe it, spent weeks combing the valley, shouting his name into the shafts until her voice gave out. One night, she walked up that same coal road and stepped off the edge. They never found her body. Not a shoe, not a scrap of fabric. Folks say she shows up when the fog gets thick enough to hide the past, always staring into the valley, always asking the same question. When I drove home that night, the radio flicked on by itself. The speakers hissed with static, and for a moment, just a thin sliver of sound. I heard a woman calling someone's name from what sounded like miles below the earth. I turned the radio off, but the air in the cab felt colder than it should have been. Heavier. I haven't taken that coal road since. Won't even go near that section of Paint Creek. But sometimes, on fog-heavy nights when the holler fills up like a bowl, I swear I see a pale shape through the tree line. A still figure, thin dress, bare feet, watching the valley like she's waiting for someone to answer her. And every now and then, when the wind moves just right, I hear her voice again, fragile and searching, drifting through the dark like it's climbing the mountain to find me. Did you see him too? It was near midnight when I turned onto that stretch of County Road 9, the part that cuts through the hardwood thickets south of Buffalo Creek. Folks around Clay County know that patch of road. 2 narrow lanes, no shoulder to speak of, and woods that press right up against the asphalt like they're trying to reclaim it. Even with my high beams on, it felt like driving through a tunnel carved out by something that didn't want me there. I'd taken that route 100 times before, usually without a second thought, but that night the air felt different. Heavy, almost metallic, like the calm before a storm that never actually comes. My truck bounced along, its headlights catching every crack in the center line. I'd been on the road all day for work, running equipment checks down by the river, and I just wanted to get home, shower, and collapse. But the longer I drove, the more I felt this strange pull in my gut. Like something was waiting around the next bend. Maybe it was the way the woods seemed alive, shifting just outside the edge of the light, or maybe it was just exhaustion. I told myself that at least. I rounded a slow curve, and that's when I saw him. At first, he was just a shape standing about 100 yards ahead, dead center on the road. But as I got closer, the figure started walking. Slow, steady steps perfectly aligned with the yellow line, like he was balancing on it. He didn't stumble or waver, didn't look drunk or disoriented. He walked like a man who'd been doing it for miles, for hours, for reasons I couldn't understand. My truck slowed on its own as my foot hovered over the brake. The man didn't turn to look at me, didn't react to my headlights flooding over him, just kept walking, calm and deliberate, head facing forward, soaking wet from head to toe. His clothes clung to him like they'd been dipped in the river and left on him to dry, only they never did. His boots left dark footprints on the pavement, heavy, water-slicked patches that shined under my beams. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I tapped the horn once. A quick, polite honk. Nothing. I flashed my high beams. Still nothing. No flinch, no acknowledgement. He just kept walking along that center line like I wasn't even there. I eased my truck beside him, matching his pace. The window was already down a crack from earlier, and I lowered it the rest of the way, leaning out just a little. "Hey, buddy," I called over the engine. "You all right? Need a ride?" His voice came out slow, worn down like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Don't leave the line." I froze. "What?" "Don't leave the line," he repeated. "He waits in the tree line." At that, he gave the slightest tilt of his head, not toward me, but toward the forest, like he didn't dare look directly. His eyes stayed forward, locked on a point down the road. His arms hung slack at his sides. The only movement was the steady rise and fall of his chest. I followed his tilt, glancing toward the woods. That's when I heard it. A shift, subtle but heavy, like a weight settling into place. Not wind, not an animal I recognized. Something deliberate, slow, pretending not to be noticed. The woods were so dense there you could barely make out more than a few feet between the trunks. My headlights didn't reach far enough. Everything beyond that beam was just a wall of black. But something was in there, watching. I felt it in my ribs before I could name it. The man stopped walking so abruptly I nearly hit the brakes out of reflex. He stayed perfectly balanced on the center line, as if stepping off even an inch would kill him. His arm lifted, trembling, and he pointed down the road, the motion stiff like it took everything he had left. "Keep going," he whispered. "Don't look back." Something in his tone struck me deeper than the words. It wasn't a warning, it was a plea. I didn't argue. I rolled up the window, put my foot on the gas, and eased forward. I forced myself not to look at him as I passed, but I still caught him in my peripheral. A tall, waterlogged man with an expression stuck somewhere between fear and absolute exhaustion. As soon as I moved ahead, my instincts betrayed me. I checked the rearview mirror. He was gone. Just gone. 1 second, he'd been right behind me, walking the line like a man glued to it. The next, the road was empty. No figure, no footsteps, no shadow. There was nowhere for him to go, no ditch he could have thrown himself into without me seeing. The forest floor was too thick for anyone to vanish into quietly, and I would have heard him if he ran. But the road behind me was clean, as if he'd never been there at all. My hands gripped the wheel hard enough to ache. I forced my eyes back to the road ahead, but even then I could feel the woods crowding in closer with every passing second. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he stepped off the line. Maybe he bolted into the woods. Maybe I blinked and missed it. But the little voice in the back of my mind kept repeating his words. Don't leave the line. The yellow paint stretched forward in the beams like a lifeline. I found myself centering the truck, keeping as close to the line as I safely could. Something about it made me feel anchored, protected, even though I didn't understand why. I drove slowly, maybe 30 miles an hour, too scared of what might be waiting in the woods to go faster. Every 100 feet I'd hear something new. A branch snapping, leaves shifting, something pacing itself with my truck just out of sight. Whatever lived in that darkness didn't move like a deer or bear. It moved like it was waiting for me to slip up. I kept my eyes forward, didn't dare look out the side windows, didn't dare stop. A mile in, the road dipped. Then it curved. My stomach twisted. The center line bent with the curve, and my headlights slid across a narrow stretch where the woods practically grew overhead. The branches looked like they were reaching down, brushing against the blacktop. I had to slow to 10 miles an hour just to stay on the line. There was a moment, maybe a second or two, where I felt something run its fingertips along the side of my truck. Light, testing, like it wanted to know if metal had give to it. I clenched my jaw and stared dead ahead. Then, just as quickly as it came, the pressure released. The forest fell silent. So silent that even the hum of my engine sounded out of place. I don't know how long I drove like that, locked onto that line, refusing to blink longer than I had to. The world outside my truck felt wrong, stretched too thin, as if the woods were warping around me. Eventually, the curve straightened out. The trees thinned. I saw the faint glow of someone's porch light at the next bend, old Miller's property. Once I passed his mailbox, the road widened and the woods pulled back a little. The tension in my chest cracked enough for me to take a breath that didn't hurt. I didn't stop driving until I reached the county road where the forest finally gave way to open fields. Only then did I pull over onto gravel, cut the engine, and sit there listening, waiting for the woods to come alive again. But they didn't. The night was just night again. I stepped out of the truck on shaky legs, walked around to the passenger side, and froze. Long streaks ran along the metal. Not scratches, not animal marks. Lines. 4 of them, parallel, perfectly straight, as if something dragged its fingers across the truck while pacing silently in the dark. The next morning, I went back to that stretch of road with Sheriff Flannery. Daylight made it look normal, peaceful even. We walked a good half-mile along that center line. No footprints, no sign of a man, no sign of anything. But Flannery told me something I'll never forget. "You're not the first to see someone walking that line," he said. "And every person who stops for him, they say the same thing. He's soaking wet, won't step off the paint, and he warns them about something in those trees." He paused, kicking a stone off the asphalt. "Thing is, nobody knows who he is. Nobody ever sees him in daylight, and the ones who don't listen, well, we don't hear from them again." I asked him what he meant by again. He just shook his head. "I don't take that road anymore. Even now, if I'm driving anywhere near those woods at night, my chest tightens, like something out there remembers me. And sometimes, late at night when the wind dies and everything feels too still, I swear I can hear a single, deliberate step. Like someone walking a perfect line, miles away but getting closer with every beat of my heart. And I pray I never see him again, because if I do, I don't think I'll be able to look away from the tree line this time." I still don't know why I decided to take Fayette Station Road that night. Anyone around these parts will tell you that after dark, that old mountain pass feels like it belongs to something older than cars and pavement. But it cuts nearly 40 minutes off the drive back to Oak Hill, and I'd worked a 13-hour shift at the plant. All I wanted was my bed. The fog started right after I passed the last turnout, the one with the rusted metal sign pointing down toward the river. Came in thick, sticky sheets, the kind that catches your headlights and throws the light right back in your face. I rolled my window down just to feel some connection to the world outside, but all I got was the cold, wet breath of the mountain pressing against my skin. You don't see fog like that often. You feel it, like it's brushing past your shoulders, moving around you, thinking about you. I slowed to maybe 20 miles an hour, hands tight on the wheel, leaning forward because I could barely make out the next 10 feet. The road twisted like a drunk snake, half cracked from winters and rock slides. You can't rush through a place like that, not if you want to keep your tires and your life. I'd gone maybe a mile into the thickest part when I saw the glow of headlights behind me. Just a faint smear of yellow at first, drifting between the trees. At first, I felt relieved, another human in the fog. But as it got closer, the comfort faded quick. There was something off about the way it moved, edging through the turns a little too smoothly, a little too quietly, like its tires weren't quite touching the pavement. By the time it closed the distance, I could make out the car, an old silver sedan, maybe late 90s model, with one headlight dimmer than the other. It tucked itself right up on my bumper. I'm talking inches. I could barely see anything, but I knew if I tapped the brakes or sneezed wrong, that thing would be in my back seat. My annoyance burned hotter than my fear at first. I motioned with my hand, big waving gesture for them to go around. Nothing. The sedan just hovered there, matching my speed perfectly, its grille practically breathing down my tailgate. I pulled off onto the shoulder, not that there was much of one. The truck leaned into the ditch, gravel crunching under me. I expected the sedan to zip past or at least pull beside me in a normal way, but instead, it just slid. That's the only way I can describe it. Eased up inch for inch until its front windows lined up exactly with mine. Not ahead, not behind, perfectly beside me. I remember staring through my fogged-up glass, trying to make out the shape of the other driver, but I couldn't see anything inside. No movement, no silhouette, just darkness. The window was rolled up, but it looked like someone had taped black cloth behind the glass. I leaned closer, squinted. That's when I realized the driver's seat was empty. Not empty like someone ducked down or leaned back. Empty like no one had ever been sitting there at all. No headrest shadow, no shoulder outline, nothing. My mind tried to play it off as the fog, or the angle, or maybe the seat was reclined. But something in my stomach turned cold, heavy, the way it does when your instincts know before your brain catches up. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Before I even decided to move, the sedan jerked slightly forward, not in a mechanical way, but like it was being pulled by strings. It drifted ahead of me slow, tires whispering against the broken pavement, no sound of an engine revving. It just glided until it blocked the whole road, bumper to bumper between both lanes. Then its reverse lights flickered on, and I don't know how to explain this without sounding crazy, but I swear to God it wasn't reversing to hit me. It was reversing to flush me out, to force me into the ditch, into the trees, into the fog where the world narrows down to nothing. A pressure spread across my chest, pure, primal dread. every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get away, to get distance from that thing. My hands moved before I could think. I slammed the truck into drive, floored the gas, and tore along the tiny sliver of shoulder, branches clawing the side of my truck hard enough that one snapped my side mirror clean off. The fog swallowed everything instantly. I couldn't tell if the sedan was following or if I'd imagined the whole thing. My pulse hammered so loud I could barely hear the engine. All I knew was I had to keep going. A mile later, maybe less, I risked a glance in the rear view. Through the wall of fog, I saw the faint outline of the silver sedan sitting perfectly still in the middle of the road. No movement, no forward creep. It just watched the road behind it, not facing me, not chasing me, just being there. Like its whole purpose was to be seen and remembered. I kept driving. I didn't slow down again until I hit the bottom of the pass, where the fog thinned into gentle wisps. My hands shook so bad I had to pull over. My truck door was gouged with scratches, sap smeared across the paint. I sat there for a long time, breathing like I'd outrun a bear. When I eventually made it home, I convinced myself it was just some idiot playing games. Someone messing with me, trying to scare me, maybe using some kind of trick to make the driver's seat look empty. Logic helped me sleep that night, but logic didn't last. Because the next morning, when I went outside to look at the damage to my truck, I saw something I hadn't noticed the night before. On the passenger side, near the handle, was a streak of something grayish-white. I touched it. It felt like powder, almost chalky, and underneath it, set lightly into the dirt on the bottom of the door, were fingerprints. Not normal ones. These were smudged long ways, like someone with long, narrow fingers had dragged them across the panel as I sped away. I tried to wipe them off, but the prints had stained into the paint. I didn't drive that road again for months, and when I finally did, it was in daylight with clear skies, and I still felt sick doing it. The pass looks normal during the day, just another forgotten road hugging the mountain. But the fear settled under my ribs the instant I reached the stretch where the fog had been thickest. There's a turnout on the right side, a spot overlooking the river where folks sometimes park to hike. It was empty when I passed, but on the way back, maybe an hour later, I saw a small gathering of people standing near the edge of the turnout, all looking down the slope. Curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when fear has had time to scab over. I pulled in. An older man, gray beard, camouflage jacket, looked up at me. "You with the sheriff's office?" he asked. I shook my head, and he jerked his chin toward the ridge below. "Another one." I followed his stare. At the bottom of the hill, crumpled among the rocks and brambles, was a silver sedan. Roof crushed, windows shattered, one headlight shattered completely, the other hanging half out of the frame. My stomach turned. It wasn't the same car. I kept telling myself that. Couldn't be. Too many silver sedans in the world. But this one had no license plate. No visible damage that suggested it had skidded off the road recently. And when the sheriff's deputy arrived and pried open the door, he called up to the older man. "Seat's empty." And something in the way he said it told me this wasn't the first time he'd found a car like that. On the ground beside the wreck, scattered like someone had dropped them from waist height, were little white flakes. I knelt down and rubbed one between my fingers. Chalky. Cold. The same texture I'd found on my truck door. The deputy didn't let me linger. Told me accidents happen. Fog rolls in quick, people panic. They tumble off the ridge. But that car didn't look like it had tumbled from anywhere. It looked placed, quietly, deliberately. Like someone or something had set it down there just to be found. That night I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the moment the sedan aligned with my window, its empty cabin shadowless and wrong. I tried to reason with myself, to chalk it up to exhaustion and fog. But reason collapses when fear remembers something your brain tries to erase. Because the longer I stared at my ceiling in the dark, the more one thought kept returning, unwelcome and cold. When I passed the turnout earlier that day, before the people gathered there, it had been empty. No car, no tire tracks, nothing. Yet an hour later, a wrecked sedan sat at the bottom of a ridge, crushed, old, dusted with time, like it had always been there. A few days later, I drove into town to get groceries. When I came out of the store, cart full of bags, I noticed a car parked 2 spaces from mine, an old silver sedan, one headlight dimmer than the other. My skin went cold, my throat closed off, but this time I forced myself to walk toward it. If it was in my head, I needed to know. I stepped to the driver's side window and looked in. Empty, same as before. No cups, no papers, no trash. Nothing that suggested a real human had ever driven it. I took one step back, ready to flee. And then I saw the dust, that same pale powder coating the rear bumper, gathering in the cracks of the trunk, clinging to the edges of the license plate screws. The same dust that had streaked my truck. The same dust that had fallen around the wreck on the ridge. I didn't wait for anything else. I got in my truck and sped all the way home, locked my doors, and sat in the dark until night swallowed everything. And somewhere out on the mountain pass, on that narrow strip of asphalt where the fog tastes like wet stone, I swear I can still see that one dim headlight glowing through the trees whenever I close my eyes. Not chasing, not following, just waiting for me to look back. I remember that night clear as if it's etched into my skin. I'd always sworn I'd never pick up hitchhikers, especially on those winding back roads between Boone and Kanawha counties. It's the kind of place where the trees press close, where shadows pool in the hollows, and you start to feel watched even when there's no one around. I was driving late, the moon a thin crescent overhead, my headlights cutting ribbons of yellow through the dark. The road was empty for miles, save for the occasional owl or rustle in the underbrush. I thought I was the only living thing on that stretch of asphalt until I saw him. He was standing barefoot on the shoulder, a small figure hunched against the chill. Mud streaked his jeans and the cuffs of his shirt, and there were tears and rips as though he'd crawled through the forest to get there. His hair was plastered to his head, wet and clinging in strands, and he didn't move until I slowed the truck. Something in me, a mix of guilt and stubbornness, I guess, made me stop. I'd passed a dozen people like him before and never stopped. Something about this one was different. He slid into the passenger seat without a word. No thank you, no glance at me, just a nod toward the windshield. The air seemed to get heavier the moment he shut the door. His breathing was shallow, almost rattling, like he was trying not to be noticed. I fumbled with my words, trying to fill the silence. Asked him where he was headed, if he needed a hospital, tried to sound casual, like any other normal drive. But he didn't answer. Not a word. He just kept staring straight ahead, eyes wide, flicking toward the tree line every time the road curved, every time there was a break in the forest. I started to feel a cold knot forming in my stomach. The kind of knot you can't shake off, no matter how fast you tell yourself it's just nerves, just exhaustion from a long drive. I asked him again, softer this time. Are you okay? You need help? He lifted his head slightly, eyes glinting in the dim glow from the dashboard, and whispered, barely audible. He's still out there. I froze, hands gripping the wheel tighter than I realized. "Who's out there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, rational. But he just shook his head, his shoulders tensed, his fingers pressed into the edge of the seat, and for the first time I noticed how cold his skin was, almost ice cold to the touch. Then it happened. A heavy thud hit the roof of my truck. Not a branch falling, not a loose sign. The different sounds, but something hard, deliberate, like someone or something had struck the metal above us. My heart jumped, and the boy flinched hard, covering his ears, rocking slightly in his seat. The sound didn't repeat immediately, but the echo lingered in the cab, vibrating through my chest, through my teeth. I tried to convince myself it was just a branch, but there was something about the timing, the rhythm, like it had been waiting. I punched the accelerator and drove faster, the tires squealing faintly on the asphalt. The boy didn't move. He didn't speak. He just kept staring forward, pale, shivering. I wanted to glance at him again, to check if he was okay, but my eyes kept drifting toward the dark tree line. Every shadow seemed too deep, every bend in the road too long. I could almost imagine movement between the trees, shapes pressing close, staying just out of reach. I told myself it was exhaustion, paranoia, but the way the boy kept saying, "He's still out there," and the thud on the roof, it felt like something was following us, something patient. By the time I hit a wider stretch of road where the moonlight spilled across the asphalt, I tried again. "You've got to tell me who's out there," I said, voice shaking. The boy just shook his head harder. His eyes darted to the tree line, wild, desperate, and then he whispered again, "Don't stop. Don't look back." I don't remember how long I drove like that. Truck humming through the night, tires eating up miles of emptiness. Every once in a while, there was a sound, just beyond the tree line, a snap, a rustle, the faint brush of something heavy. I'd slam my foot on the gas, thinking maybe we could outrun it, but the road twisted and turned, and the sound seemed to match every curve, keeping pace just behind us. My knuckles were white on the wheel, and my stomach kept knotting tighter with every mile. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, I saw lights. A gas station near the interstate, its flickering neon humming like a beacon. I slowed down, relief rushing in like warm blood, my body trembling. And then I realized I hadn't checked on him in a long while. The seat was empty. I stopped the truck, heart hammering, chest tight. No door had opened, no footsteps leading away in the gravel, just damp impressions where his body had been, soaked into the fabric of the seat like a ghost had pressed against it and vanished. I looked around frantically, expecting to see him in the shadows of the lot, but there was nothing. No sign of him at all. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the exhaustion, the dark road, the isolation, it had conjured something my mind wanted to see. But then I noticed the seat, damp, cold, slightly creased as if someone had leaned forward, afraid to sit still. And then my eyes caught the rearview mirror. There, faint and almost impossible to describe, was a smudge, like a handprint on the glass. Small, pale, desperate. I got out of the truck, circling the vehicle, scanning the lot, listening for anything, but there was only the hum of the pumps and the occasional car passing on the highway beyond. No footprints in the gravel, no sign of him on the road, no trail back toward the woods. Nothing. Only the lingering dampness on the seat and the memory of his eyes, wide and terrified, staring into the dark, whispering about someone still out there. I left the truck running and went inside to pay for gas. The clerk looked up, barely noticing me. I asked if anyone had been around earlier, anyone asking for help. He frowned and shook his head. "Not tonight," he said. "No one around here. Just you." I got back in the truck, hands still shaking, and drove off toward the interstate. I didn't stop again until I hit a familiar exit in Charleston. City lights sprawling ahead, warmth and life and safety. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, that the kid, whatever he was, had been warning me about someone or something still wandering those back roads. I kept checking the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see him sitting there again or something else following close behind, but there was nothing. Months later, I told a friend about it while we sat on his porch, beer sweating between our hands. He laughed it off, said maybe it was a kid lost in the woods, scared, wanted a ride. Maybe. But when I described him, the barefoot, torn clothes, pale skin, how he flinched at the sound on the roof, my friend went quiet. "You mean like one of the Boone County legends?" he asked. "The ones that vanish if you try to help?" I didn't answer. I just remembered the way his eyes had tracked the tree line, the way he'd whispered, "He's still out there." My stomach clenched again, because I hadn't seen anyone or anything follow us that night, at least not that I could confirm. And yet, that sound on the roof, that oppressive sense of being watched, the way the air had felt thicker in the cab. There was no mistaking it. Something had been out there, something patient, waiting, maybe even watching, and somehow it had left him, or him had left it. I haven't driven that road since. I don't think I'll ever drive it again at night. Every time I hear a rustle outside my window or a branch tap in the dark, my mind drifts back to that boy, to his eyes, to the wet, cold dampness of his presence and the impossible way he vanished. And sometimes, when I'm lying in bed and the wind rattles the eaves, I swear I hear the faintest whisper. He's still out there. I don't know who he was. I don't know what was chasing him, or maybe chasing me by association. I only know that for those few miles on that desolate road, the world felt thinner, more fragile, like the shadows themselves were alive, patient and waiting. And I know that sometimes, even now, in the quiet hours before dawn, I feel like I can hear the soft echo of bare feet pressing against the shoulder of the road, vanishing into the tree line just beyond the reach of the headlights, leaving nothing but a damp, cold seat and the memory of a terror I can't explain. I've tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, the stress of long nights driving alone, but the damp seat, the imprint of his presence, the whisper, I know better. I know there are things that haunt these roads, things that slip past your mind's defenses when the trees press in and the night is too quiet. And some nights, I swear, if I listened closely enough, I'd hear him again, whispering from just beyond the edge of the forest. He's still out there. And I'll never forget the way it made my skin crawl, the way it made every instinct in me scream to keep moving, to keep the doors locked, to never, ever pick up a stranger on those back roads again. I remember that night like it happened yesterday, though I've told the story 100 times and it never seems to get any easier to swallow. I was driving home from a late shift, tired and impatient, my old pickup rattling along the winding roads that follow the Elk River. It was the kind of night where the fog clings to the ground, and the trees seem to lean in close to the road, whispering secrets you can almost hear if you're foolish enough to listen. I didn't know the rules back then. I didn't care about the old-timers' warnings. One horn before the bridge, one horn after, they said. If you didn't, well, something would follow you. I laughed it off. Superstitions were for people who didn't understand the woods. I didn't understand them much better, but I like to think I was smarter than a superstition. The bridge itself is nothing fancy, just a narrow, one-lane wooden span that arches over the river like a tired, crooked tooth. It looks harmless enough in daylight, the paint peeling, the rails weathered and gray. But at night, especially when the fog's heavy and the water beneath disappears into shadow, it's different. It feels alive. Not with animals or the river itself, but with a sense of expectation, as if it's been waiting for someone to cross, and maybe waiting for them to fail some unseen rule. I remember rolling toward it that night, headlights cutting ribbons through the mist, the tires crunching gravel, and I thought I'd have a laugh about the whole thing. I gave a single, quick honk as I entered, because I wasn't about to risk being rude to the legend. But halfway across, I realized I forgot the second one. When I reached the far side, I just kept driving, thinking nothing of it. I never expected that a small lapse could change everything. I hit the main road and turned toward home, the pickup humming under me. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your own heartbeat sound like a jackhammer. Then I heard it, just a single note at first, low and distant, like a car horn somewhere far behind me. I glanced in the rear view, expecting to see another vehicle, maybe a late trucker or a townie out running errands. But the road was empty. No headlights. Nothing. Then it came again. Longer this time. Like the sound stretched itself across the hills, holding one impossible breath. My chest tightened. I told myself it was a truck horn somewhere, muffled by the fog, a coincidence. But it kept following me. Every curve, every dip, the sound was there, perfectly measured, distant but unmistakable. And no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't shake it. I tried rationalizing it, of course. My mind raced, trying to pin it on something I could explain. Maybe it was the fog playing tricks, maybe a train horn echoing in the hills, maybe my nerves. But nothing fit. It never got louder, it never faded. Just that single, low note, patient and steady, always behind me, always waiting. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I caught myself glancing over my shoulder far more than a reasonable person would. The woods along the river blurred into shadow, trees like blackened sentinels pressing in. Somewhere, a branch snapped, and I jumped so hard I nearly lost control of the truck. My eyes darted to the road signs, to the curves I knew by memory, and I kept telling myself I'd be home soon. Just a few more miles. That's all. Then it would be over. By the time I turned onto my driveway, the sound stopped. Just like that. The fog had thinned slightly, the night air heavier, but still, the oppressive feeling that had been riding with me disappeared. Or so I thought. I killed the engine, leaning back in my seat, trying to calm my racing heart. I listened for anything, wind in the trees, owls hooting, nothing. And then I saw it, lying in the dirt beside my truck. Footprints, fresh, bare, human, leading from the road, stretching into the dark tree line behind my house. I froze, staring at them, my mind refusing to make sense of it. Whoever or whatever had made them, they'd been there after I drove past. They had followed me all the way home. I stepped out carefully, my boots crunching over gravel, heart hammering in my chest. The footprints ended at the tree line, swallowed by shadows. The trees themselves seemed to lean forward like they were listening, like they were part of whatever waited beyond the edge of the light. I bent down to inspect the prints. 5 toes, narrow heels, human. But something about them didn't sit right. The mud was soft, damp from recent rain, and yet they seemed deliberate. Not like someone had walked casually, but like they had been moving with purpose. Following me. Waiting. My mind tried to shake it off, telling me I'd imagined it, that it was just the wind or some stray animal pressing its paw in the mud in a way that resembled a foot. But I knew better. I felt it in the stillness, in the way the air itself seemed to watch me. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the house, lights on, windows locked, listening to every creak and groan of the old wood around me. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, and every snap of a branch sounded like footsteps outside. I tried reading, tried drinking coffee, anything to convince myself it was just paranoia. But then I started noticing small things. Doors slightly ajar, the feeling of being watched when I walked from room to room, the sound of breathing just outside the window, slow and patient, not heavy like a person running or moving quickly, but deliberate. I'd freeze in place, straining to listen, and it would stop the instant I moved my head, always gone before I could see it. Days passed, weeks. The horn never sounded again, but the memory of it stayed lodged in my mind, a low, unshakable hum under everything else. And sometimes, when the wind dies completely and the trees stand perfectly still, I swear I hear it again. Not the horn this time, just the breathing, soft and deliberate, coming from the edge of the woods. My dog refuses to go near that side of the yard anymore. He growls at the shadows where nothing is visible. I've tried to ignore it, but ignoring it doesn't make it go away. I see footprints sometimes, fresh in the mud after rain. I've checked them, but they never lead back to the road anymore, only deeper into the trees, as if whatever follows me isn't constrained by roads or paths. It's patient, and I know it remembers the rule I broke, the second horn I never gave. People laugh when I tell them. Superstitions, old-timers' stories, but I don't. Not anymore. I've driven past that bridge during the day, and it feels different, empty, harmless, sun glinting off the river, but I don't think the bridge itself did anything to me. It's what lives in the space after it, waiting for someone careless enough to ignore the tradition that's dangerous. I've learned that much. That night taught me that the rules aren't just old myths. They're a warning. And whatever it is that follows, it doesn't need to hurry. It doesn't care about distance. It just waits, patiently, until you make a mistake, until you forget. I've considered moving. I've considered leaving the area entirely, but there's something tethering me here, something I can't explain. Maybe it's pride, or maybe it's disbelief that gives me a false sense of control. But I've learned not to travel that bridge after dark, and I've learned never to forget the horn. Once, I tried honking my horn when I reached the bridge just to see if it would matter after the fact. Nothing. Silence. The rule works only in one direction. You have to follow it exactly, or else it catches you. And once it does, you live with it. You never see it in the light of day. You never hear it as a noise that makes sense. It just waits, patiently, and the footprints remind you that it is there, watching, always just beyond sight. Some nights, when the air is calm and the forest holds its breath, I hear the breathing again. I can feel it pressing in around the edges of the yard, the faintest movement in the underbrush. It doesn't come closer. It doesn't retreat. It just waits, keeping pace, invisible, reminding me that it exists and that the rule is not something to test. I've grown accustomed to it in a way, like a shadow you can't ignore, a story that lives in your chest. I try not to think about it too much, but the second I do, I can almost hear that long, drawn-out horn in the distance, like a warning, like a memory of the night I forgot and it remembered for me. And sometimes, when I lie in bed staring at the ceiling, I imagine what it would be like to see it. I imagine the human shape it would take if it finally stepped out from the tree line. I don't know if I want to see it. Part of me hopes I never do, but I know, deep down, that it isn't going anywhere. It is waiting for the night when I slip again, for the night when I forget, and it will be there, patient as ever, letting me know that the rule was never mine to break. I've never heard the horn again, but I know it's out there, somewhere in the dark, listening. And the footprints, they'll never stop appearing.